Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. We are live doing something that I actually tried to do yesterday and it didn't actually stream it out. So I'm still learning OBS. I have a stream this afternoon on burnout, which I'm excited about. I've been talking about for a couple of weeks. Looking forward to that. Hoping I'm learning the technology so that I can do it well. Today, I want to talk about this Harvard AI study. So I went through and read this yesterday, did some analysis on it. You may or may not have seen it. If you have, I've been seeing it mostly on Facebook. This is the type of thing I'm seeing. So we've got this graph, which is in the study. It says Harvard's tracked 285,000 firms. Results before AI, 1 senior plus 3 juniors was a 4-person team. After AI, 1 senior plus Claude equals same output. In the near future, 1 senior plus AI equals a 40-person team. And this is what they're claiming that have found. Big if true, right? Not everybody wants to go and read Harvard studies, but I am a special kind of nerd who enjoys this kind of thing. And so what I'm going to do today, I'm not reading it to you. I'm going to go through. You can see I've got some stuff highlighted. I'm just going to make some comments on this. So give you some commentary, some analysis on this. Now, what this study actually did is they went through LinkedIn data and they looked at job postings and the people who were exiting jobs, entering jobs, and whether they were senior or junior. Mostly they were looking at the postings themselves. And then doing some AI and kind of trying to massage and clean that data. So let's jump in, see what this actually says. And I'm just going to focus on kind of my comments here. So at the beginning, they talk about what we're really looking at for AI, or what we're seeing being replaced, are these quote unquote intellectually mundane tasks. The one that jumped out at me here was reviewing legal documents. And what this really means for us is, often when people go into a quote unquote junior role at a company, junior roles not only provide a valuable function for the business by kind of offloading some of that mundane work, but it also gives the junior person an opportunity to learn. So when it comes to reviewing legal documents, that paralegal, that intern, that beginning person, it's helping them become used to case studies, case law, the structure of the documents, how they're written, the content that they have. It gives them a chance to learn and to grow. And so people starting out, this is your signal that you need to level up early. Companies are less likely to pay you to learn. And there's a lot of commentary online of like, oh, this is terrible. How are we ever going to get senior people again? We totally will. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. I think we'll still have senior people in the future. That's not going to go away. But for people who are just starting your career, you got to level up a little bit, and I'll share more about that as we go through this. This next one has sort of 2 possibilities. So it says either AI is going to help junior people be more productive, or juniors are going to be replaced. And my not so hot take is it's the second. The second is and will continue to be happen. Juniors will be replaced by AI. The study does show that this decline in junior positions that they noted through their LinkedIn analysis is not actually through layoffs. We'll talk more about that later in the paper. It's through attrition. They're hiring fewer juniors. But like in the past, we will effectively redefine what it means to be junior. That bar is going to be raised. This has happened many times. The next thing here, still in the introduction, but I wanted to read this one. One executive at the recruiting firm Hirewell noted that marketing agency clients have all but stopped requesting entry-level staff, young grads once in high demand, but whose work is now a home run for AI. So what this really signals to me is colleges that pitch their degrees that their degrees will help people get jobs, they need to catch up fast. I worked in higher education for a little over a decade, and I'm very familiar with higher education, not just as an institution, but as an industry and a business. And for decades now, the promise of higher education is that if you get a degree, you will make more money over your lifetime. And statistically, that is true. Even these days, when we feel like it's really hard to get a job out of college, or our degrees aren't necessarily getting accepted the way that we expected them to be, college grads still typically make more than non-college grads. But I think that is shifting a little bit, and there are tools that help people even if they don't necessarily get that college education. And colleges, higher ed, is very slow typically to adapt and to come up with new programs and new curriculum and everything. I think that colleges are going to need to catch up faster, or their degrees will be devalued. So I'm not going to comment much on the methods and validity of the research here. I think there are some concerns with it, but those concerns are kind of quibbling. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And you can get into this paper here. You can see at the top, if you search on Google for SSRN-5425555, you'll find this paper. You can read it yourself. It's free. Overall, I think that their methods were pretty good. They tried to do a good job of both looking at the data and then cleaning it, massaging it in some different ways using their statistical analysis and AI. I think the big limiting factor, which I'll talk about later, is the data source. But my overall hope is more nuance that may be developed later in later studies. Like, I want to see more study on this, but overall, I think this is pretty good. We shouldn't discard this out of hand. That's my reading of the methodology and the approach for it. I think it's pretty good, but I'm not going to go in depth here. I'm also not going to go in depth on related literature. You know, I love lit reviews. And if you're a nerd like me, you may want to look through this, but I'm going to skip it for the live stream. Suffice it to say, they did some research in advance, found some other stuff about this. Similarly, the data and descriptive patterns, it's interesting, but I want to get to the meat of the study and tell you what's actually found. It is worth mentioning, though, this is the thing I referenced earlier, the data source is LinkedIn, which means they are dependent. And by they, I mean the people who wrote this and did this analysis. They are dependent on how good and clean that data is. And they're using AI to interpret and clean the data, which is fraught in and of itself, because we can't inspect their code or process. They do have in the appendix some prompts and some other details about what they did, but you know, we're not doing a full deep dive review here of their whole process. So there are potential problems. The findings of this paper do match my anecdotal observations. So I'm not willing to throw out the study just because it's not perfect or fully verifiable. And I look forward to seeing more research done in this area. All right, let's get to it. Descriptive patterns. I found this to be really interesting. So when it uses the term adopters, what it's referring to is companies that have adopted AI. So it writes, adopters also tend to hire from higher quality universities with fewer juniors from tier 5. So as I read this, you know, it really highlights to me, if you're at a tier 1, tier 2 university, one of the outcomes that we know happens in those, it's less about the academics, though the academic rigor is fantastic there. But it's who you know. Networking continues to trump all, as does exposure to more advanced leaders, people who are doing the work in the field who are more likely to teach at a tier 1 or tier 2 institution. If you're unfamiliar with the tiering systems for universities, it often has to do with research, original research that's being done, the amount of research, the type of research, the amount of funding they have for it, the facilities that they have to conduct research, the tools at their disposal, the number of people with doctorates, that type of stuff. There's a bunch of factors that go into the tiering of institutions. But you might be wondering, like me, what exactly were the tiers of institutions? And so I went to AI, as I tend to do. Let me see if I can find my window here. There we go. So I went out and said, hey, I went to Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri, where I live. Help me to understand within my context what the tiers are of universities. And Claude, which is my preferred tool, noted it should be careful because that's subjective, can be measured different ways. But like I said, often it comes down to research dollars. So tier 1, which is highest quality, 3.4% of junior hires. That statistic is coming out of this table. So I gave it this table, but I also said, help me understand tier 1 to tier 5. Give me some context for that. So 3.4% of junior hires at AI adopting companies came from tier 1. That's like Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Princeton. Okay, that's helpful to know. Tier 2, University of Michigan, University of Virginia. Tier 2 institutions are still very high research. They're not the Ivy League. They're not rated quite as highly. They don't have as big of an endowment necessarily. But they tend to be state schools, and they tend to be flagship schools, and they tend to do a ton of research, have a ton of PhDs. Tier 3, that's the most common, both in terms of the number of hires and then also where a lot of people graduate from. Again, I'm in Missouri, so it gave me examples of University of Missouri, which is our flagship sort of land grant institution here in Missouri, Kansas State University, Iowa State University. So these are really big colleges. They're kind of the top one in the state, but they don't necessarily do as much research as Tier 2. Tier 4, that's me, where I went, Missouri State University, 15.4% of junior hires. Pretty interesting there. And then Tier 5, the lowest quality. So these are like community colleges. They make up 9.4% of junior hires. Now, what was interesting, and this was in the introduction, I skipped over it. We'll see it in the conclusion. I highlighted it there. But this amount, that 9.4% of junior hires, it's obviously smaller, but it hasn't changed a whole lot. I'll talk more about that later. So this is what it gave for this tiering, which for me begs the question. Okay, 3.4% of junior hires are from Tier 1, 20.9% from Tier 3. I'm thinking about the percent of hires from tiers and how does it align with the percent of attendees? So if 20.9% of junior hires are from Tier 3, does it just so happen that 20.9% of graduates are from Tier 3 institutions? Like, does this actually represent a bias or a preference, or does it match the population, sort of curve, right? That's my question. And Claude's like, that's really insightful, but I don't know. And my process, whenever I hit something that AI doesn't really know, is to tell it, write me a research question. And I'm going to give that research question to Perplexity. So based on our conversation, it writes me a great research question. I pop over to Perplexity, give it that research question, set it up to do a deep dive research and report. It gives me a bunch of information, which is interesting to read, but I want to export this as Markdown, and then I give it back to Claude. And I say, use this attached research, answer my question. So it looks at the graduate supply and the hiring patterns and notes that about 4% of people graduate from Tier 1 and their hiring is 3.4%, pretty close to proportional. 7% of people graduate from Tier 2, but 10.7% of those hired at AI adopting firms come from Tier 2. 16% from Tier 3, hiring at 20.9. And then we get to the underrepresented, which is the really interesting one. So 25% are from Tier 4 in terms of graduation, but 15.4% are hired. So despite producing 1 in 4 graduates, only 1 in 6.5 are getting hired at AI adopting firms. 48% of college graduates come from Tier 5. So that's a lot. And a stat that I don't have here, but I think is kind of interesting. Only about a third of people in the United States of America get a bachelor's degree. So it's already a minority of the population that are getting bachelor's degrees. And then for postgraduate education, I don't think these statistics have shifted much. It's about 8% that get it. Also, that bachelor's number, because it's hard to quantify this sometimes, it's in 6 or fewer years. So 30-ish% get a bachelor's degree in 6 or fewer years. About 8% go on to get a master's. So, Tier 5, 48%, nearly half of all graduates, but only 1 in 10 hires are there. So, okay, now we can see it's not just a population distribution, but there actually is a preference for people from higher tier schools. So that's interesting. Take it all with a grain of salt. This is Perplexity doing some research and running numbers. I have caught Perplexity out multiple times on being incorrect, but I have a feeling in this case it's probably about right. Some of the graphs I scroll past, this is the one from the Facebook post. This is looking at workforce dynamics by adoption, so we can see number of seniors is going up, juniors is starting to go down, sort of backing that up. If you read through all of this, it's kind of going through how they did their statistical analysis, looking at hires, exits, promotions, and say, taken together, these findings imply that the reduction in junior headcount within adopting firms is not the result of layoffs or elevated attrition, but instead reflects a slowdown in new entry. Good news, if you are a junior person in a role, if you already have a job and you're a junior person, you're not being overly targeted by layoffs. There are a ton of layoffs happening, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're at risk. It's bad news for juniors who are looking for a role. So there's a slowdown in new entry, and that is going to be a challenge for you. So be aware of that. All right, coming down to the conclusion now. So they document this sharp relative decline in junior employment at adopting firms alongside continued growth in senior employment. Looking at how they define this, it doesn't quite account for what if companies are just redefining what used to be a junior role as a senior role. And I do want to give them credit. If you look through their methodology and everything, they do a really good job of looking at the type of role that a person had before, or if they had no role, so when they're entering a job, in order to determine who is actually junior in terms of like their experience, right? So I think this is legit, but I do want to offer a cautionary note here and something for you to be aware of, because I've been doing this for a couple decades now. I've done a ton of hiring and interviews. I've worked with multiple companies on this to help them write job descriptions and conduct searches. I'm not like a recruiter, but I'm kind of a subject matter expert. And so sometimes companies come to me and say, hey, can you help us find good candidates? And one of the things I've observed is that this bar does shift over time of what is a junior. And the best way to think about it is you've got a senior person, right? They've already been doing this for a while. They know stuff. They get paid the big bucks because of their experience and the things that they've learned. As time goes on, in tech, we sometimes say it's like every 18 months, you kind of got to learn new stuff and level up. The things that used to be cutting edge and hard become status quo. And as they become status quo, as they become basic, they get pushed down to juniors. And so now the seniors are doing the next sort of cutting edge thing, and the juniors are doing the things the seniors used to do. This pattern is constant. It plays out over and over again, and it typically follows the invention of new tools. So let's think back to woodworking, right? There were things that required a lot of skill and were very challenging to do. In terms of woodworking, I'm not a woodworking person, so I'm speaking, quite somewhat from ignorance here. I'm going to do some broad generalizations. As power tools are invented and better methods of measurement and even like some automation there, like makes it really easy to cut a square angle. It makes it easier to measure things and get that correct and accurate. It requires less technical skill to do those things. Then you can offload some of the stuff to juniors, and the seniors can move to the more advanced, challenging work. It's the same way in tech. And I ran a large team at Missouri State University. I very deliberately did this. I made our seniors, they had to level up. And then I forced our part-time student workers to level up. It made them much more valuable when they graduated. They got a job more easily. And so I share this to say, if you are in college right now, be aware that the definition of junior is probably going to change. I don't think we're going to get rid of junior roles. We still need people to do that quote unquote intellectually mundane work, but what is considered mundane is going to change. AI is changing that rapidly, and we don't quite know where it's going to fall out yet, but it is. So be aware of it. Second thing, they find this heterogeneity in educational background. Decline in junior employment follows a U-shaped pattern. They have the same paragraph in the introduction. When I read this paragraph in the introduction, I thought, interesting. The elite schools and low-tier schools both showed negligible effects in terms of AI adoption. But once I did more analysis, it was, well, it's because the lowest tier was already not employed in the space. So they're not hiring fewer juniors from low-tier schools. That's not because low-tier schools are special in some way. It's just that they were already not hiring that many from them. The people they probably are hiring are people who are just exceptional. They went to a lower-tier school, but independently they're exceptional. So I do feel, as someone who worked in higher ed for over a decade, I feel confident you do get a better education and networking at a tier 1 or tier 2 school. But no matter where you are, you get out of it what you put into it. And if you go to a tier 1 or a tier 2 school and you don't show up to class and you don't join student organizations and you don't make friends and invest in relationships and build your network and do all those things, if you just skip out and you're not present, you're not engaged, you're not getting the benefit of that piece of paper. The piece of paper is not really what gets you there. It's the relationships you build and the stuff you learn and the experience you can demonstrate. And if you go to a tier 4 school like I did, or even a tier 5, and you put in the work and you go out and you meet people and you learn stuff and you build experience and you have something that you can point to as an outcome that you produced, and you have people that trust you because they know you, then you're going to be fine. That's really what matters, is what you put into it. All right. AI adoption is not random, and adopters differ systematically in size, workforce composition, and sector. So Felicity Wild, I'm taking an AI ethics course by email from her, just this free thing. It's pretty cool. She wrote recently that there's some recent research from MIT that revealed that while 40% of companies have purchased official AI subscriptions, employees from over 90% of organizations regularly use personal AI tools for work tasks. This study from MIT, the Gen AI Divide Study of AI in Business 2025, this came out in July of this year. Again, you can go out, find it free. It's pretty easy to find. And again, like, big if true, and I suspect it is true, this surprising result that 95% of organizations, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Sorry about that. That's my next point. And I'm live, so there's nothing I can do about it. That's all right. Let's focus on this before I skip ahead. I have it down below. So here's my point with this here. This AI adoption is not random, this research. 40% of companies have purchased official AI. Employees from over 90% of companies regularly use it. I want to highlight this because the research for this paper from Harvard was conducted using LinkedIn, and it's using data that people have shared, which means it's using their job descriptions when they're posting jobs. It's using people's descriptions of the work that they've done, the applications, the positions hired, filled, etc. It likely underrepresents the AI adopting companies. And we keep seeing this term adopters in here, right? So it says AI adoption is not random. They differ systematically. We got to proceed with caution. So here's my caution for you that they don't note in this paper, which is only 40% of companies have purchased official AI subscriptions. Those are probably the companies flagged as AI adopters in this Harvard study. Those are probably the companies that have it in their job descriptions. But actually AI is getting used at probably 90% plus of companies. So when they say non-adopters, if we go back to that table of non-adopters are hiring here, well, in reality, probably a lot of these non-adopters actually are using AI, and that's going to shift. And that does throw some of the data here into question. So I just wanted to highlight that as a thing for you to be aware of, because the data that this study from Harvard is based on, that's one of the big flaws there. And the study from MIT kind of, highlights this. Okay, so here's the thing I started to jump to, because it's the first sentence in this report, which is, despite $30 to $40 billion in enterprise investment in Gen AI. So these are companies that are trying to build their own AI, build custom tools. These are very much the adopters, right? These are the companies that have adopted AI and they're into it. The report from MIT uncovered a surprising result that 95% of organizations are getting zero return. This is important for you to know for a couple of reasons. One, just my own sort of story. I have worked with companies that are trying to build their own AI solutions. I've done some comparative analysis for them. And what I find is that the $20 a month you spend on ChatGPT or Claude, I use Claude and Perplexity, have Pro for both. So I'm spending like $40 a month. It typically beats the systems that people are spending $1 to $2 million on to develop in-house. If you are learning those tools that you can get as just a person on the market, you're going to be in great shape. And I think that this is going to come back. It's going to swing some things back, right? That's not to say AI is going to go away, but the way that we use and the way we invest in it is going to change. It's going to become very important for individuals to know how to do it. Making AI work well, this represents an engineering investment. And what I want to communicate is I think it's important for you to think about this as a personnel and training investment. And I think we're going to see companies start to shift that way. It's going to push it down out of the engineering space and into the individual space. So it's going to be important for you to learn this stuff too, not in terms of building things, but in terms of using the tools that are available. All right. Last thing I'm going to touch on in this report. They've got this statement here. It feels a little bit like a academic. We want to push this out a little bit further in our conclusion of why this is important. And they write, because early career jobs play a critical role in lifetime wage growth and mobility, these dynamics may carry lasting consequences for inequality and the college wage premium. That doesn't resonate with me. Like I said earlier, I think junior is just going to get redefined. I think if you're starting out, you do need to learn this stuff. You need to get some real world experience and build something. And then you're going to get a junior role that matches what senior used to be. That's just the way the world works. It's worked that way for a long, long time. I don't think this means that we're going to have massive inequality, down the road. We have massive inequality now. That is getting worse. I'm very cognizant of that. At the same time, as a millennial, and I think I'm on that cusp where I'm sometimes labeled as a geriatric millennial, which I don't love, but I am on the upper bands of millennial. There were reports for a long time of how poor millennials were, and the share of wealth that millennials held was really small. And 10 years later, the reports showed millennials were doing pretty well financially, and we're all struggling with home ownership and debt and things like that, especially college debt. But statistically, it is shifting. I think over time that kind of works itself out. So I don't see AI as the big doom and gloom thing that it's sometimes painted. And I think this is going to work out. Again, we've seen this pattern before. Now, the last thing I said there, this was the last thing. It's the last annotation here. The last thing I actually want to point out, reading this whole thing, analyzing it, commenting on it, nowhere do we see that the Harvard study says one senior plus Claude is the same output as a 4-person team, and soon it's going to be 40, and juniors are gone forever. That's not what the study says. The study says that there appears to be, they call it a seniority bias, but there's really two things that we see out of the study. The actual two things that we see are companies that have adopted AI are hiring more people from higher tier universities than from lower tier universities. Not super shocking, but okay, good to know. Interesting information. And we see that the number of junior hires is decreasing relative to senior hires. Good to know as well. I think that this will even out over time. I think we're going to kind of redefine some of these terms. I think people are still going to get jobs, but I do think for the junior person, particularly if you are in college right now, it behooves you to build a portfolio. That's really what you need. The thing that has gotten me the most work has been my portfolio, where I can show what I've built, what I've done, the outcomes that I've delivered. And if you're still in college, you need to do that. And you can't rely on internships to get you there. Like that, I think, is probably going to be the biggest shift. And this is a little bit of a crystal ball for me, but I don't think that you are going to be able to rely on somebody paying you to get that experience. I think you're going to have to hustle, and you're going to have to come up with some projects, and they can't just be, I did a project for a class and turned it in for a grade. There's very few barriers at this point for you actually shipping something, getting it out into the real world, getting some real life feedback, getting some real life experience. And you're going to have to do that during your college years, or if you don't go to college, like that's what you should be doing. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was interesting. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of these. Feel free to email me or reach out or something if there's some other paper you want me to look at, because I enjoy this type of thing. And of course, subscribe so you can find out when I go live in the future. As I said, I'm doing one this afternoon, but if you're watching this, in the future at some point, that's irrelevant. So hope that this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me today or whenever you're watching this. And I look forward to seeing you again soon sometime.